Thanks for joining us for tonight's event. My name is Kevin. I'm one of the event hosts here at Powell's Books. And before we begin, I want to encourage you to check out our lineup of upcoming virtual events by visiting our website at powells.com. If you don't already do so, please follow us on our social medias, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and our YouTube channel. Tonight, we are honored to host New York Times feature writer Elizabeth Williamson, along with Sandy Hook parent Robbie Parker. On December 14th, 2012, a gunman killed 20 first graders and 6 educators at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. 10 years later, Sandy Hook has become a foundational story of how false conspiracy narratives and malicious misinformation have gained traction in society. One of the nation's most devastating mass shootings, Sandy Hook, was used to create destructive and painful myths. Driven by ideology or profit, or for no sound reason at all, some people insist it never occurred, or was staged by the federal government as a pretext for seizing Americans' firearms. They tormented the victims' relatives online, accosted them on the street and at memorial events, accusing them of faking their loved ones' murders. Some family members have been stalked and forced into hiding. A gun was fired into the home of one parent. Present at the creation of this terrible crusade was Alex Jones's InfoWars, a far-right outlet that aired noxious Sandy Hook theories to millions and even raised money for the conspiracy theorists. Enabled by Facebook, YouTube, and other social media companies' failure to curb harmful content, the conspiratorial questions grew into demands for more proof, and unanswered demands turned into rage. The Sandy Hook families, led by the father of the youngest victim, refused to accept this. Elizabeth Williamson's Sandy Hook, An American Tragedy and the Battle for Truth, is the story of their battle to preserve their loved ones' legacies, even in the face of threats to their own lives. Through exhaustive reporting, narrative storytelling, and intimate portraits, Sandy Hook is the definitive book on one of the most shocking cultural ruptures of the internet era. Williamson will be joined tonight by Robbie Parker, father of Emily Parker, one of the 20 children tragically killed in the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting. This evening's event will include an audience Q&A. Please use the Q&A button that's at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to ask a question at any time. If someone has typed a question that you'd also like to know the answer to, you can even upvote that particular question by clicking the thumbs up. Perhaps most importantly, please support Elizabeth and Powell's by purchasing copies of her book from us. A link to buy Sandy Hook will be shared in the chat a couple of times this evening. Elizabeth, Robbie, we truly appreciate the opportunity to host you both tonight. Thanks for being here.
Thanks very much, Kevin.
Pleasure, thank you.
So I will begin by just offering a little bit of an overview of the book, and then we can go to Robbie, who lived the book. This book is really these families' stories and the story of how they fought back against just an unconscionable second trauma inflicted by conspiracy theorists who believed or claimed to believe that this shooting never occurred, and that the families were actors in a pretext for draconian gun control measures. So the story is told through 3 families. The Parkers are one. Lenny Posner and his wife Veronique, they're the parents of Noah Posner, who was the youngest Sandy Hook victim. And then the third family, Neil Heslin and Scarlett Lewis, who are the parents of Jesse Lewis, another first grader who was killed. Lenny Posner was the parent who had a tech background and really understood the way that these mistruths traveled through the internet. He was interested in computers from the time the industry was really in its infancy. And so he really did understand that Sandy Hook was not an isolated incident, but rather a kind of foundational story in what would happen as we saw. So whether it was every mesh 20 election lie and the January 6th visit to the Capitol by a mob. And what happened with Robbie was something that there's a particular occurrence in 2016 in which Robbie, and he'll tell you about it, but he was accosted on the street by a man who recognized him from probably from an InfoWars broadcast, because Robbie, though he didn't know it at the time, was the first parent to speak publicly about what had happened. This was the day after Emily's death, in the nighttime. In front of Robbie's church, he agreed to meet who he thought was one, maybe two reporters, arrived to find a sea of cameras and microphones, stepped to the lectern to make his remarks, to reminisce about Emily and her life and her relationship with her sisters and family. And in seeing this crowd and being nervous, did a kind of half gasp or a little bit of a laugh almost before he reached the lectern, and then realized, what the task was before him. And so this split second in what was an otherwise extremely anguished reminiscence about Emily was used by Alex Jones as somehow proof that Robbie was an actor and that he was lying, because who would laugh when they stepped to the lectern to speak about their daughter who had just been murdered? I mean, this is an example of the kind of cruelty that was inflicted on the families for these 9 years. So Alex Jones repeated this loop again and again on his show for years, imitating Robbie, mocking him, and people began to come after the Parkers, write letters. And so then the family knew that, these people knew where they lived, turning up places, sending emails. Robbie, jump in here anytime. There were so many examples. I'm trying to remember them all, but friends had to shut down a fundraising site, raising money for Emily and for the family, because it was flooded with abusive comments. But then just to fast forward to 2016, when the Parkers were invited to an event that included a part of the event which was meant to honor Emily and her life. So the whole family went to Seattle, and while Robbie was dropped the family at the hotel, parked the car, was walking back to the hotel when a man accosted him on the street. Robbie thought that he was offering condolences initially, extended his hand for a handshake, and the man just started spitting the most obscene insults and accusations, calling Robbie a liar and a profiteer, essentially. And that was, to me, as the person who wrote this, 2016 was a kind of pivotal year. It was a presidential election year. A lot of these conspiracy theories were floating out there. That was Pizzagate, the accusation that Democratic elites were trafficking children out of a Washington pizzeria, which is really only a stone's throw from where I sit right now. And that brought a gunman to the restaurant that year in December. Robbie's encounter was in the fall of 2016. And in January of 2016, Lenny Posner received death threats from a woman who was later jailed for that. So that was a symbolic year in that it showed that people were more and more willing to not only abuse these families and so many other individuals in their communities online, but rather to cross from the virtual to the real world and confront them in real life. And this sort of inclination toward violence, as we saw at Comet Pizza and Pizzagate when the gunman turned up there and fired a weapon in the restaurant. I think the culmination of that was January 6th, where you have people who, in droves believed a lie spread online and showed they were willing to defend that falsehood with violence. So why don't I turn to you, Robbie, and have you just speak a little bit about maybe going back to the very beginning and when these things first started to surface?
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. And honestly, for everybody that's listening, I really appreciate the work that Elizabeth has done for this book. I read it, I've read all of it, and I took a lot away from it, even though I was one of the people that's highlighted that lived this experience and might have been considered somebody that was in the know of all of this. I learned a lot of things from reading this book that I was not aware of. And it changed my perception of a lot of people. And it gave me a lot of gratitude for people who I've never met, who stood up and had to face some of these conspiracy theorists. People in the town of Newtown, Connecticut that work for the city who they were receiving lots of harassment and stuff like that. They were a shield for me and my family. And even the other dads that she mentioned, Lenny and Neil, I know these men. I've spent a little bit of time with them, but because of the situation in which we were introduced to each other, it's not like we know each other very well. And so I got to learn more about them and who they are and develop a really good understanding and appreciation for who they are and their children. To this day, one of my favorite things is when I do learn something new about one of the other kids that went to school with Emily and lost their lives with Emily. It's kind of weird to say it like this maybe, but it's there. That event is, it's something that means a lot to us, even though it's horrific and it took so much from all of us. Having a shared experience with people on an event as horrific as it was, it marks something that's very sacred to me. Emily's life was very sacred to me. And to be around other people that got to share in her life is something that's always special to me. And people that are sharing this experience of losing our kids together is also very special. And so I took a lot away from this book and I learned a lot. And for anybody that's hearing the subject material and they think this is really hard stuff, I'm not going to say it's not hard, but I reassure you that it's not too hard, and would really try and challenge anybody that thinks they might not want to dive into this to step out of your comfort zone a little bit and see a little bit more about the world that we all live in and that we all share, so that we can all be better members of it. So that's my unofficial plug, I guess, for your book. But so as far as the conspiracy theory topic, I was first introduced to it. I've never really got to tell my side of the story until Elizabeth was able to write about it. And so I think this is kind of important for me to be here. I feel like I get an opportunity to kind of find my voice for the first time and share that with everybody that's here. So I have great friends that even though we were living in Connecticut, I grew up in Utah. I'd gone to school here in the Pacific Northwest. We lived in Hillsborough, went to Pacific University. I've visited Pal's Book many times with our girls and stuff. And so we love it here. And our family in Utah, I had friends here and had friends in Utah. We didn't really have much in that way in Connecticut. And we had lived there for less than a year after I had taken a job. My wife had a cousin that lived close by over in New York. And then my little brother, he moved into the area shortly after us so he could attend school. And other than that, there wasn't really much for us there. We didn't have very big roots. And so when the shooting happened, it had a ripple effect, as anybody here might remember, but into where we did have roots, it reached far and deep. And so back here in the Pacific Northwest and in Utah. And so I have these amazing friends that just really wanted help. And the only thing that they could think of was they started a memorial page on Facebook they opened up a bank account to receive donations because they wanted help with funeral expenses. And that was it, because they're amazing people and they have great hearts. And so I had learned about this, and the day after the shooting, I was on Emily's memorial page and just seeing some really nice things that people were sharing and what they were saying, and just really, even at that moment, had a lot of gratitude. And my heart was really opened up to my friends and people who just really cared. And then the first video link popped up, and after that, it was just kind of this tidal wave over the next 3 to 4 weeks of everybody that was on that Facebook account, all the moderators, where all their time was spent trying to take down this material of videos claiming that this was a false flag event, and it was beyond hurtful, and it was just really confusing. I don't really have the words to express the emotions that I felt the first time I came across this stuff, other than I was just bewildered and didn't really know how to take it. I had heard conspiracies, and the biggest conspiracy I think I ever tried to believe was that Kurt Cobain was murdered and he didn't commit suicide. That was the only thing I wanted to entertain in the conspiracy world for a while. But these people were really vile, and they were really mean, and they were coming after me. And I had 2 other daughters. I still have 2 other daughters. They were 4 and 3 at the time, and I felt like I needed to protect them. And so I'm quickly just said, I'm not going to engage. I've always learned that you don't engage with a bully. If the longer you stay quiet, they're going to go away and they're going to go find something else. And one of my friends that started the Facebook page, he was also feeling really emotional about it. One afternoon, we had a conversation about how should we approach this? Do we need to confront them? Do we need to try and like use logic and reason to get back with them? And my response at the time, very naively, was, we'll give them a couple of weeks and then they're going to go back to looking for Bigfoot and they'll leave us alone. And here we are 9 years later. There's now, there are multiple lawsuits fighting these people, because that's where the trajectory of this course has taken us. And so that was my first experience to it. And then, so over the years, I tried to stay out of it. I was very quiet on social media. I was getting emails sent to me, phone calls at my work. I was getting, messages on social media all the time. People calling me, people sending threats. And unfortunately, there was one, my friend's wife that helped start the Facebook page. She answered the phone one day, and there was someone on the other line just spewing just a lot of hatred and just vile things at her. We ended up finding out who this person was, found out that he had done this to other families from other mass shootings, from Aurora, Colorado to Wisconsin. And the police were actually able to apprehend this fellow. He lives in Portland, Oregon, and he was arrested. And so that was the first time that I actually felt that somebody had some reach. All these people are anonymous. They hide out in the shadows, and we kind of had to create a narrative of who these people are. And then over the course of the next few years, we relocated back to the Northwest. We were participating in a fundraising event for a great organization called Art with Heart. One of the things we love to talk about is how artistic our daughter was. We had started a nonprofit called the Emily Parker Art Connection, which all we did was we received money and we donate money to organizations like Art with Heart, who do art therapy, who use art as a way to try and help children heal. And so we partnered with them, and they invited us up for their fundraiser. I took my girls with us. We were going to have a really fun weekend staying in a hotel and swimming in the pool, and we were going to have a fancy dinner at this place and do this fundraising event. So Elizabeth talked about this a little bit, but in my own words, I dropped my wife and girls off at the hotel, and I drove around trying to find a parking lot to park our car. And on my way back to the hotel, which is a couple blocks away now, this guy, and this is in 2016. So just for some context, this is almost 4 years after Sandy Hook had happened, and I'm 3,000 miles away from Newtown, Connecticut. and I'm walking on a random street in Seattle. And a guy gives me a quizzical look and he stops and he starts kind of muttering like, hey, aren't you, or didn't you have a daughter that? And over the years, this has been something that I had happened to me a number of times. And usually it was met with people extending condolences, giving me very long, prolonged, very tight, awkward hugs. And just because people care. And it was always amazing to me about this shooting, about how it really touched and changed a lot of people's lives. And it was always really sweet for me to hear stories about my daughter in those moments, and people saying like, I remember her, and share something that they remembered about her. And so I see that look and I recognize that look. And I reached my hand out and I said, yeah, I was like, my name's Robbie. My daughter died at Sandy Hook. I'm not going to necessarily repeat everything that he said to me, but the demeanor on his face turned very dark. And he, trying to think of how to even express what he said. How do you sleep at night? You blank, blank, blank. And he got up in my face, and I was shocked and I was stunned for a minute, and I didn't know how to react. The people that had attacked me had always done so with anonymity and from a very safe distance. And so I never had to think about how I would respond if anybody actually confronted me. And the first thing I thought of was like, I can't lead him to my family. And so I turned around and started walking in the opposite direction of where the hotel was. And he followed me and followed me. And he was taller than me. He was a bigger guy than I was. And surprisingly, he didn't look like a guy that sat in his mother's basement eating Doritos till 2 a.m., pounding out conspiracy theories on his computer. He looked like any other professional that you would see randomly walking down the streets in downtown Seattle. And he was probably maybe a couple years older than me. And he was just jabbering in my ear about how much money I had made and how in cahoots I was with the government, and spewing stuff off about gun control and Obama. And I just walked faster and faster, and my emotions were building and building and building. And then he said Emily's name, and I lost it. And I had to turn around, and I thought, I need to stand up. I need to stand up for Emily. And so I went right back at him and started out with, how do you sleep at night? You blink, blink, blink. And we kind of got into it. And we were sitting there and on the corner of this intersection, just yelling back and forth. And I knew I wasn't going to get anywhere. I wasn't going to convert this guy to believe me. But all the emotion that I'd been holding on for so long finally had an outlet, because I had somebody in which I could express it. And people started to kind of walk around us, and there's a space given, and nobody really knew what was going to happen. I didn't know what was going to happen. I was feeling just emotionally overwhelmed. I was feeling there was a sense of just empowerment and also a ton of fear. And he finally stormed off. I don't even know what triggered him to finally just end. And he stormed off, and I was just left heaving and thought, how am I going to get back to my kids? I don't even know how long I don't know how long I've been gone. And I needed a minute to cool down. So I walked around the block, making sure that nobody was following me, making sure that nobody else recognized me. And after a while, I made it back to the hotel, and I went up to our room. I didn't have a key. Alyssa had already checked in and everything. I knock on the door, and Alyssa opens it. And I thought I was composed, and I thought that I had gotten back to where I needed to be emotionally. And I see the color drain from her face for a minute, and just immediately it's like, what happened? And I was shaking. I didn't realize I was still shaking. And she pulls me into the bathroom, and she shuts the door. And as I was getting yanked into the bathroom, I could see the girls jumping on the bed in their swimsuits, and they were finally excited that I had finally showed up. And I just sit on the toilet, and she puts my face in her hands, and she's like, what happened? And I just finally just lost it and just started bawling. and try to explain to her what it was that I had just experienced. And this was a pivotal moment for me in the sense of like, they weren't going away, and these bullies weren't staying quiet. Things were just getting worse and worse and worse. And everything about how I handled myself in regards to this particular topic changed that day. And it was weird too, because so I come out of that, I cry, we hug each other, we're fine. We need to like, show our girls a good time and put on this front that like, the world that we live in is still very safe for us to go swimming. And I knew it wasn't anymore. Like the shooting had changed that. I lived 4 years of trying to understand that I had lost all control over what happens to me and what happens to my family. I had lost all control that I thought I used to have about, I am the one that can keep my family safe. And then here was another moment where anything that I had built up over the last 4 years to give me that sense of safety and security was just shattered again. I was on the elevator with Madeline right after this too. And this was after we had swam. We were going to go to the event.
Madeline's your daughter.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Madeline's my middle daughter. And so I'm on the elevator, and as elevators do, they stop and the doors open and somebody was looking at me. And I immediately grabbed Madeline and I shoved her behind me and tried to protect her from this person that was staring at me. And he wasn't staring at me. He was just a guy wanting to go down to the lobby, just like I was. But it just was the first moment where it was like I realized that that sense of protection over my girls was going to change. I didn't realize the era that we lived in. I was naive to social media. I quickly realized that this is going to be the world that my daughters grow up in. And they're going to use Google to find out more about what happened that day. They're going to be interested. They're going to try and find things, and they're going to be attacked. And so that was the day that I decided that I'm not going to stay stagnant anymore. And my resolve to how I was going to protect my family and how I was going to honor Emily and her memory completely changed.
And so that was 2016, Robbie. And then 2018 came. Maybe if you want to talk about a little bit about what happened right after that, that further changed your mind and encouraged you to join the lawsuit. So Robbie is one of the families of 10 Sandy Hook victims who are suing Alex Jones in Texas and in Connecticut. So there are the families of 8 victims are suing Jones in Connecticut, and Robbie's part of that case. And then there are 3 more cases, but representing the families of 2 victims down in Texas, where InfoWars, Alex Jones's business, is based. But there was one further incident that convinced you to join the lawsuit, right, Robbie? In talking with the Pettys.
Correct. Yeah. So, what was really interesting about becoming a family that was involved in a mass shooting in America, that you received the worst initiation to belong to a fraternity of families. And afterwards, it was very odd to be accepted into the families, that I can just start naming stuff off and it's going to be so horrible that I can't remember them all. But like Virginia Tech, when I say Virginia Tech, you guys know what I'm talking about. Aurora that I mentioned. There was a shooting in Wisconsin in August of 2012 at a Sikh temple. Those families opened their arms and their hearts to us. And then when that happens to you and you feel embraced by this community of people who have endured violence and suffering like that, when you see it start happening again, you can't help but open up your heart to those people as well. And so the Parkland High School shooting in Florida occurred. And in a weird series of events, there was this mutual person who went to church with Alyssa and I here in Washington that had since moved to Florida, and he knew a family whose daughter had been killed in the Parkland shooting. So he offered if, to connect us and see if we would be willing to talk with this family. And of course we were willing to talk with them. And it was a hard conversation. Even me having gone through this, I don't know what to say to people. All I can really do is recognize where they're at in the process. And I see that, and it's I want to be there for them, and I have to check in emotionally, because it's hard too, because I recognize that face, and I recognize that fear, and I recognize just that pain of what it is that they're going through. And as we were having this conversation with these parents, I'm fumbling, I don't know what to say, I don't know how to tell them things are going to get better, or because I can't say those things anymore. I have no silver lining that I used to hold dear to or believe, or that's been regurgitated to me since, that I feel that's worth repeating to anybody that's going through what I know they're going through. And a very similar story started to come up, other than just, the pain that we heard. They started talking about how, the media had behaved, and wanting comments from these people, and that the dad acquiesced and finally was like, I do have something I want to share. I want to share more about who my daughter was. I don't want my daughter just to be known as a victim. I don't want my daughter to feel like that's her legacy. So he did a statement, and he spoke to cameras, and he told the world who his daughter was and what he loved about her. And he then all of a sudden also started getting harassed. And the mom said something. She was like, that's just something that we didn't expect. And I'm sure you guys didn't have to go through something like that. Which, almost, I hate to say this, it almost made me laugh because of what I had been living between December of 2012 until that moment. And what was telling about that was, even though it was the world that I had been introduced to and that I had to learn how to navigate through, it was a world that was still really naive to a lot of people until they had to experience it. And so at that moment, I understood, like, I have something I can do for them. I am down the road, and I have the strength and the ability that I can fight. And I haven't put my toe into this fight before, and I am going to fight now. And so that was the catalyst that drove me to want to join the lawsuit against Alex Jones. I spoke earlier about how important I feel like it is to finally find my voice. There's been other traumatic events in my life that have taught me to stay quiet. And this is the beginning step of me learning that I don't need to stay quiet anymore, and I have a story to tell, and that I can do that not just for myself, but I could do that for this family, because I didn't want to see that family suffering. And I knew that there were going to be more, and that the fraternity that we were a part of was going to grow and grow. And I wanted to stop their continued suffering before it could even happen, because one of the biggest lessons I learned from all this is that as much as, like, it hurts that people come after us or attack us in this way, the hardest thing to admit to is the fact that it siphons your energy to grieve. And what families like ours, and anybody that's gone through trauma or abuse or anything like that, you need to grieve, and you need that time, and you need the space to do it. And these people infiltrate your lives, and they steal that from you. And so I didn't want that to happen to anybody else.
I think it's really important to note that, the three families in the book took different approaches to this, like the rest of us would. Some people said, like the Parkers, don't feed the trolls, and let's hope they'll go away. If you lay low, they won't come after you. But I think we've seen in recent years that, people who believe these kinds of conspiracy theories and this misinformation, whether it is about coronavirus, or it's about Pizzagate or QAnon, or, any major event that happens, they tend to form their own community online, circulate this material, get a lot of psychic income. And so what happens is they become a kind of group that they're sort of in their own fortress, guarding against intrusions of truth. And that is typical of whether it is people who are theorizing around a tragedy like Sandy Hook, or they're theorizing around the 2020 election. anybody who comes to them trying to debunk or whatever, just try and set them straight, ends up being, kind of an enemy to them. And that is sort of what makes some of this happen. I mean, we could go to questions in a minute. So folks, please put them in the Q&A. But I think that's sort of what these things all have in common, right? I mean, and Sandy Hook was sort of a foundational story of that. No one could imagine that in this town that, and if we all recall, President Obama had just been reelected, but Newtown went for Mitt Romney. So the idea that a town seamlessly cooperated in a grand hoax, working with a president they didn't vote for to implement draconian gun control measures through staging a mass shooting is just.
We seem to have lost Elizabeth a little bit there. She's frozen. She came back earlier when she froze, but we'll see if she can unfreeze or rejoin us, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. I don't want it to, it's not just me.
Yeah. Robbie, do you want to speak further about what she was talking about with the gun control issues?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to the fact, I mean, I can't speak to gun control issues. I've never had an opinion about it. I've never, lobbied or had any say on either side of that debate. I stay very neutral. But the point that she's making about the sense of community that conspiracy theorists find, that's very real. And that was something that I really underestimated. I thought these were a lot of lone wolves, and they're not. And hey, Elizabeth.
I'm back. Sorry.
So I'll just
connection issue.
No, you're good. So I had interpreted conspiracy theorists as lone wolves that were just out there, and I knew that they were a small number trying to sound really big, and it felt really big. But what I didn't understand and what I didn't appreciate is in this world where it's so important to feel connected and to feel like you have a place. That's what these people found with each other. They found a place where they could share like views, just like you do when you go to church with people that think the same way that you do. They found each other online. They were able to form a bond, and they were able to, be in this echo chamber where all their beliefs were getting fulfilled, and they were able to share it with other people, and other people were just as passionate. And so I didn't understand that. And so that was one of the things that Elizabeth's book actually did help me with as well, is it's so easy for us to say, like, these people have mental health issues, or we want to put a label on them to make them feel like they're farther from us than they really are. All of us have one in our family, those awkward people at Thanksgiving or whatever. But like, we always want to create this safe distance from us. And I'm not saying that we need to engage with these people, but we do need to do our best to try and understand them. And we do need to see them as every bit as part of our society, and as we are, and understand what it is that makes them tick. And so that we can hopefully, over time, like we can be a solution. And that a solution isn't with confrontation. It's trying to find a way to connect with people, trying to find a way to help them feel like they're being seen and heard and understood as well. Yeah. Elizabeth, did you want to finish your thought?
Oh, yeah. No, sorry about that, folks. I just have a really weak internet connection for some reason. So, yeah, I mean, I think that the difference between, that person that we all remember from, the family reunion who has the strange JFK theory or whatever, two things. One, social media. The uptake of social media, even since Virginia Tech in 2007, has been exponential. And so people gather there. It's become a new kind of town square, or, some of the very first Facebook pages were built around quilting and knitting. And I always think about this Sandy Hook hoax group that Lenny Posner the father of Noah, went to try and answer their questions, and they ended up attacking him. But people who gather there, it's like they're a quilting circle. They're all building on a theory. Each one has something to contribute, an anomaly in the original reporting in the mainstream media, or some little detail that doesn't add up to them. And they're kind of creating this crazy quilt that is the conspiracy theory. And then they're bonded, so then they lash out outward against the so-called targets of these plots. And in this case, it was the families. But there are a couple questions here, Robbie, and I think they are kind of for you. So the first one is from Joel, who says, I don't know if I have a question or how to state the question other than, how can you keep yourself together emotionally? I'm in tears listening to you, and I remember it being in tears off and on for days and days after Sandy Hook. I wonder how I would handle the situation if one or both of our daughters were killed for any reason, and then to have to deal with accusers and conspirators. I would need a lot of counseling and therapy.
Yeah, I'll take that one. Yeah, thanks, Joel. So two things. Yeah, you do need a lot, not you. I need a lot of therapy and counseling, and I get a lot of that. As recently as yesterday, still dealing with this. And so, but that's not necessarily the answer. The one thing I want to tell you, Joel, is just like, I appreciate the fact that you put yourself in my shoes for a minute and you said, I wonder how I would handle that situation. That is something that conspiracy theory people, at least the ones that interact with me, they don't do. They seem to know how I should react, what I should say, how I should respond. A lot of the flack I got was that I gave a press conference and I did hold my emotions back in the sense that I just didn't break down and bawl. They don't stop to wonder how many hours that night that I cried after I had to tuck my other daughters into bed, and just laying on my bed and my tears like just pouring down my face and sopping my pillow. They never stopped to think as if that actually really happened. And how even on a walk with my wife recently, and we're enjoying a beautiful day, and we start talking about Emily, and we're in a place now where we can smile and we can remember her, and we can be really sad too. And learning through counseling and therapy how to hold a lot of conflicting emotions all at the same time. And so as far as like holding it together for this webinar, I know that there's an emotional price tag for me in doing this. And I can sit here and I can talk about these things partly because I've talked a lot about them over the last 9 years, formally or informally, and that doesn't make it easier for me. And I just know that there's going to be an emotional price tag. I'm going to have to pay that price, but I'm totally willing to do it to really get the message out there and to help other people.
And that goes to the second question in the chat, which is, how do we fight this? How do we fight misinformation and the spread of conspiracy theories online? And this has actually been the role of Lenny Posner, who decided early on that this was an early warning of what could happen, that this was not about gun control or the watershed moment for, that everyone thought Sandy Hook was, for gun safety measures. That was the subject of a lot of the conspiracy theories, but actually what this was the beginning of a trend that would extend, and get worse in the subsequent years. So what he had done was to start with copyright. So there were photos of Emily, for example, that were used in some of this material. The Parkers own those photos. Those are family photos, and that violates the terms of service on the social media platforms for somebody to take those and use them in this kind of material. So what Lenny and his volunteer group called the Honor Network did was they took down thousands of pieces of content by filing these DCMA claims, which are copyright violations. That was the first tool in their toolkit. The lawsuits were another tool. Now it's time to look at some policy solutions, limiting the legal immunity that the social media platforms have when falsehoods that are harmful to people travel over them. And there are some measures. There's a thing called Section 230, which is the law that protects these social media companies from liability when people spread harmful falsehoods. At the New York Times, that doesn't happen. If we libel someone, we get sued, but the social media platforms are immune. So people are starting to take a look at that in Congress and limit some of that immunity. So that's another tool in the toolkit. And then the other thing is, the third one would be working with the individuals themselves who are prone to believing these conspiracy theories. And there's a lot of research being done about pre-bunking, which means you sort of teach people how conspiracy theories are formulated so that they can recognize them when they see them online and be less likely to spread them. To kind of look at the earmarks of, what is misinformation, and be a little bit suspicious so that you don't spread that and that you're more likely to report it. And that is actually very encouraging research. Let me see if there's another. So this is from Barry. You talked about dealing with the anonymous online people hiding in the shadows versus being confronted by someone in person on the streets. How do you prepare yourself for a situation where you have no idea whether the venomous person could be violent?
Yeah, that's a great question because I still don't know how to answer that. After that encounter in Seattle, and that glass had been shattered, and I knew we had to do. I just needed a different approach. And of course, for me, I can brainstorm all the great things that I would come up with and all those, witty comments I would say back and all this kind of stuff. But in the moment when it happens, the thing is it always catches you off guard and you never really quite expect it. And so it's hard to know exactly how you're going to react. As far as when it comes to my family's safety, there are things that my wife and I have talked about. If someone were to approach us again, I'm not going to engage like I did with that man in Seattle. I think I was very lucky in that encounter. I would never engage. I would do the other things that you try to draw attention to yourself, trying to make sure that other people know that there's what's going on, stuff like that. My wife and I ended up having to install security cameras. We lived in a really rural area of Washington, and we had no need to really get a security system for our house, but we needed to. We did do that. We don't allow our daughters, like, for a long time when their schools were like, can we post pictures of them on social media? It was like, absolutely not. And we've kind of softened on that. I don't want to deprive my kids of any of their experience on life because of what happened to their sister. There was another point I was actually trying to get to, and it's missing me right now. But the thing is I guess the point that I think Elizabeth's making in this book, and especially like what we did start to see, is like we are starting to see that people who do start to take in this information and develop these kinds of beliefs, they are more and more willing to act. They are more and more willing to be confrontational, and they're more and more willing to do that. And so because of the way that that's changed, especially since the pandemic, I hate to say it, man, I'm sorry, I don't have a great answer. And so the world is just changing so fast, and people's emotions and how they express them and how threatened they feel is really scary. And so I'll acknowledge that it's scary, and just do everything you can to protect you and the people you care about. And I will quit rambling because I don't have a good answer.
I'll be the hopeful voice in this and say that the platforms too, although, as Lenny found, and my book kind of describes, how he came around to this, but they respond to social shaming. They, they really, if you call them out publicly shame them, the platforms do take action. And Lenny spent years trying to do this. And now he's a trusted flagger for a lot of these social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and has gotten thousands of pieces of content taken down. And they are starting to wake up to the fact, not fast enough, not thoroughly enough, not paying attention enough, but they are beginning to realize that they have created tools that are being used to torment people and worse. So the open question is, what are some policy solutions or some regulatory solutions? Because it's gotten, these creations have gotten so large that they are difficult to police.
And the one thing I forgot to mention too is our local phenom in Portland. He had been arrested. He had been imprisoned. He did get released. He was on parole, and within I don't know exactly when his parole ended, but seemingly within days of his parole being terminated, he started sending letters to my house. And so we had to consult with security people and see how credible these threats were that he was saying. And he was just letting me know, like, I know where you live. And fortunately, he ended up doing something that landed him in prison again. And he is getting treatment due to the most recent location I know where he's at. I actually don't know if he's out and about anymore or not, but I know that he doesn't live far from me. And so it is weird living a life where I do feel like I constantly have to kind of pay attention to what's going on around me at all times, especially when I'm with my kids and who might be looking. And so. Looks like Elizabeth froze, and it's really unfortunate because the next question is specifically for her.
Yeah, hopefully she can unfreeze here. Looks like she's gonna try to come back to us.
Great. I can fill the gap a little bit as far as the pre-bunking thing. Yes, it is something that she does talk about in her book. She'd be able she'd be the best one to talk about the resources available for doing that. But I do feel like that's the biggest hopeful tool that we have going forward. We're talking about the next question, Elizabeth, about pre-bunking and how can we learn more about it and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. It is in my book. Sander van der Linden at Cambridge University has done these studies, and he's done them through online games. So he kind of
Oh, seems like she does have a bad connection. Hopefully I'm sure she'll come back. We're almost to the end of our hour, but we'll wait for her to come back so we can wrap it up. Robbie, did you have were you going to say something else about that?
I mean, she was talking about these video games, ironically, seem to be a very good solution, and it does put people that puts them in scenarios to kind of help them recognize what it is they're looking at and start to develop a keen eye for what could be real, what could be fake.
Thank you. Thanks for helping me out on that one. I'm so sorry about this connection. Okay, so we've answered the pre-bunking question, I think. Yeah, Robbie?
Awkwardly, but I think we got around to it. Yeah.
It is in the book. Yeah, so you're welcome, John. Yeah, so anyway, yeah, that's, I was starting to say that's done through an online game that actually was used in the run up to the election and has been tested since then more widely, where people recognize the elements of a conspiracy theory, particularly a political one, where you're demonizing one group, you're using really inflammatory language, kind of anger-producing material. So yeah, and people start to recognize it when they see it in the real world, sort of on the virtual world online, and take action against it or be less inclined to spread it. Okay. Gotta love technology. Yes, I am furious. So, okay, any other questions before we sign off? We have 4 minutes, I think.
I promise I cannot be long-winded if anybody has something that they really want addressed.
Anyone? Okay. Well, thank you all very much. We really appreciate you being here, Kevin.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth and Robbie, for joining us. This is the book right here, Sandy Hook. I just put the link to it in the chat. There it is for you right there. Click on that. You can order it from us. The copy I have has a signed book plate in it too, so some signatures in there as well. I'm also going to post the link in the chat to our YouTube page. I just did that right there. Be sure to click on that. And this event will be showing up there sometime tomorrow. So if you have friends that missed it, if you want to share this event, please check our YouTube page tomorrow. It'll be going up there sometime tomorrow. And you can also see all of our other events that we've had in this Zoom era of Powell's events. Lots of great stuff on that page. Elizabeth, again, and Robbie, such an important talk. And we're very happy and honored to have both of you here with us tonight. Thank you so much. And for those at home, thank you for tuning in and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.